So just a disclaimer, I guess. Anyway, so my name is Ray Reinhardt. If you go to rayreinhardt.blog, I talked about the essential day that's set up astrologically for November 4th. We're asking about my input on the Antifa things. So my original layout with what was going on with the Antifa day, essentially the way that I do, I look at the day itself. I didn't actually look primarily at the efficientness or the effectiveness of the actual rallies themselves, but just looking at this, Libra ruling the 10th house, and Libra Mars specifically is not known for it being very ruthless or impulsive, and in fact, they're very diplomatic. And with specifically, I was looking up a couple of the actual charts themselves for the actual rallies, and I'm going to look at those here right now because the problem is that everybody is now getting this idea or this kind of opinion or perspective of Antifa as being completely incapable, and even some of them were saying that there weren't even that massive of numbers as usual. But why would you actually say you're going to go physically hunt people down and then show your face in public and announce it on, like actual news platforms, right? It just wouldn't make sense. So it would be that the people that are actually going to be doing that, if that's the case, are going to be people that didn't show up today. Sorry if it seems my arm goes in front of this. I have my other laptop up here. So for Austin, Texas, this one happened at 1 p.m. today. We have at the moment that it started, we have Pluto, Juno, and Lilith and Saturn in the 12th house. So the 12th house, first off, I want to highlight Juno and Pluto being conjunct. So Pluto's obviously about revolution, transformation by force if means necessary. But Juno is essentially, it's supposed to be more of enlightening or, epiphany or the wisdom that is accrued after experience sort of midpoint or asteroid or whatever. So with it being conjunct to Pluto, that would mean that this is going to be a slow, painful progression. Meaning that since the Pluto thing is essentially supposed to represent the death signature that I was referring to on my chart, that it wouldn't be instantaneous deaths. The only ones that would be associated with instantaneous deaths would be some of the Antifa people, which obviously there was a news report about that, where they started to harass like an older lady or something in South Carolina. And her husband or herself, I didn't actually thoroughly read it too close, but basically whoever they were attacking was a sniper from a retired veteran sniper and shot all of them with fatal wounds. And I'm like, well, that's what you get, dude. That's what you get. But anyway, so specifically for this one, the actual now house, the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th, right? So the only thing that's in the 1st house is the south node. And so it's going to be some sort of, the self is essentially going, in this case, it would be the Antifa creating or having their actual demonstrations. It's going to have some sort of repetition of whatever their past kind of traumas have been. So their utter failures to organize themselves and accurately be able to articulate their message is essentially what was happening at Austin. I don't know any of the details with any of the actual rallies because I don't watch anything like that. But then we look at the 4th house. So this would be associated with the country or like just the homeland in general. So this would be associated physically with Austin, or I would say the city hall in Austin, Texas. So we had Eris there, which was retrograde. Means that Eris is usually a force to be reckoned with or explosive, fast and furious, but it's retrograde right now, so it's even more delayed. So it says, let's see. It says it's the goddess of discord affecting home and family. You may even have a large or noisy kind of group. So it was probably just a bunch of people talking shit in Austin. I don't know if anybody decides they want to chime in and talk about that. That would be, you can go ahead and validate that or not. It just says that it will be more hectic and it'll be like, a bunch of children in a school cafeteria. Essentially is the gist of what was going on with that. Uranus is also in that house, but it's retrograde as well. So that's like shock, rebelliousness, but being retrograde, it's either, acts more like Saturn, or it's delayed, or it's distorted. That's what I keep hearing in the live feeds. Yeah, that's what even Boo was watching a couple of them, and I was like, I heard just them shouting humanity, humanity, and I'm like, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I've heard enough. I was just looking for like the reports of bodies and deaths, honestly. I mean, we all know how I'm like that. But anyway, so Uranus being the fourth house means that it's just busy and unconventional, and things not going as planned. And Pallas in there, and being in Taurus, says that you might be crying too much. Yeah. And you just, says that, you like decorating and carrying out creative projects, but because Uranus is there, it's likely to completely fumble, right? And then we have the moon in that house as well, so it would be people that are in the local community, or the in general, which is obviously them, trying to voice their discontent and their passions with that. Then we look to the seventh house. We have Ceres in the seventh house, and so that's actually an elemental signature. And fascinatingly enough, when I looked up online, all of the towns that I wrote down, like Chicago, New York, parts of California, Seattle, all of those places. I don't know, Boston. Some girls laughing through a chat. I don't know if is Boston getting any weird weather? Or you're from Boston, aren't you? I think right, Fred. I noticed that Chicago and all of Washington and California. Yeah, yes, right. So you can thank the elementals for that. They're actually the elementals actually, because they have trees in that house there. It's referencing that they actually caused weather phenomenon to sabotage any of the ethers that have now taken essentially possession of people and are encouraging them to riot and everything. And yeah, which I still think is funny too. I think the one in New York, humanity, and that's a really projection if you think about it, because if in theory what I'm following and what the charts are insinuating with what I know, they had something psychedelic going on. Yeah, that's mental illness with what I was talking about last night. But what's funny is if I'm correct and all these people actually are in spirit attachment like we've talked about, and they're actually full on possessed, and they're chanting that they want to save humanity, that's a really, really funny counter projection if you ask me. So Ceres being in the seventh house, the now would mean that weather is essentially going to I don't know if there was weather issues going on in Austin during the actual rally, but that's what that would insinuate. Then we look at the 10th house, we have Vesta. And then we have Venus. Obviously, I already said that. And then we have Jupiter. So your intended desires, profession in your public life in the 10th house. And the sun's obviously there as well. So funny thing is that all of the now houses didn't really have anything going on in it besides just insinuating that they were not going to be well organized or well communicated. Yeah, so that would be for Austin. And then when we look to the future houses, the future houses is the second house, and then the fifth house, and the eighth house, and then so the second house has Neptune in it, which we all know what Neptune does. Essentially clouds the potential future with that. There's also a grand trine to Jupiter and to Hades as well. Fascinating. But so Neptune is for being associated with weather. So the future essentially would be tonight. Every single one of those towns has a hazardous weather advisory going into effect all through Sunday, which is fascinating. So that would be the ethers trying to stop, the elementals trying to stop the ethers, essentially. And then the fifth house, and that's the house of self, so the future of self. So with following the procession, it's essentially going to be the weather that ends up sabotaging a lot of this. But some people, they still may not potentially be safe. And the elementals did reference last night that there was going to be screaming blood and cutting people. So, and fascinatingly enough, Fred, too, on a synchronistic level, December 3rd last year, I decided to do a random video of basically there was a home, like a attempted murder and arson in a home that was in my local area, and I decided I saw and then like the police released the time that it was basically a teenager that tried to set his house on fire and kill them all, and so they had the time in which the parents said they all went to bed, and then they had their car. So I used all those time signatures to make charts, and it had very distinct similarities to tonight. So that's fascinating. Then we move on to the Austin rally was a complete and utter failure. They looked like they just were rambling and ranting, and apparently somebody was showing a Confederate flag, which I find really hilarious. Because, yeah, the whole Civil War thing happened because the Republicans essentially were overtaxing the Democratic South from having their slave labor so they could continue the agriculture, and because they started inflating the taxes on the slaves, and then they made them so they couldn't take them to the new states that they were actually creating. That's why the Civil War started. So it was all because of taxes and inflation and territory. Yeah, and then slavery is still going on today, guys. That's why why all the leftists are fighting for minimum wage hikes and stuff. It's all still going on today. Just because you're paid like a little minimal wage does not really change it much from slavery. In fact, I think some of the people back in the day would probably get better things because at least they got free housing and stuff like that, and then free amenities, and they were taken care of, and it was better quality than most of the places that people live now. I know that sucks and that sounds awful, but yeah. Anyways, so for Chicago, we have the same layout again. Everything's in the exact same place. So the one I'm assuming was a complete bust as well. Then I look at the LA Antifa rally. We have Curon in the second house, so that's going to be a weakness with. So there's probably not going to be any kind of extensive weather going on for the LA one. And there's also Eris and Uranus in the third house instead of the fourth house. So I mean that there's going to be some sort of deviancy or malicious kind of intent that will be covert or secret, basically conspiring to do something to the immediate area. So that might be actually attacks in public. I'm not entirely sure if there's been any actual significant activity, like violence-wise or confrontation-wise in LA. I mean, I'm not a big fan of LA, and even on a calm day, LA is pretty scary. So I do see Ceres still in the seventh house there. Let's see. And then we have Mars in the ninth house for this one, Venus. So obviously the 10th house isn't necessarily it isn't governed by the moment now. So I would say that the Los Angeles one, if anything, would be the most successful with being at least falling through with their threat or what they're insinuating. But we already know that California is like a hot mess anyway, and yeah. Then I move on to New York City. That was at 2 p.m. today. And the difference here is that the Neptune is in the first house, so there would be some sort of utter confusion going on. The entire rally and demonstration itself, it being in downtown, like New York, it was on Broadway and 42nd Street on a weekend during November. Everybody's likely doing Christmas shopping or whatever else. I would assume that it would be a confusing hot mess. I mean, New York just seems like it would be confusing anyway. I've never been there. I don't really want to go there. There's going to be some sort of weakness or debilitation, essentially, the future events of that one, likely just because of how congested New York is and the potential body count that could ensue. I would assume that there was either violence in New York, or will be. I mean, isn't there always? And then again, we have Eris, Uranus, and Pallas, and the Earth symbol all in the third house, which means the immediate neighborhoods and area, or the communication, or people just being attacked, traveling, or just random bystanders or people, just as they're walking by or driving by, would likely be attacked. I'm sure that there's something like that will come up. We all know that stuff's probably not being reported anyway. Ceres is in the 6th house for this one, meaning that the weather's likely not. I didn't see any weather advisories for New York, so the weather's not going to intervene with this. So New York will likely be one of the ones that's very concerning. We have Mars in the 8th house. It's of secrets. So the motives, being diplomatic and saying humanity and humanity today, specifically in New York, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Their actual intentional motives are being masked or hidden, or their actual Saturday. I hate. Wish people all knew that astrology, like Saturday, is ruled by Saturn, and it means that you're not supposed to be wild. That you should. Yeah. Why police are always out getting your asses busted, by the way, because Saturn Day is not for playing. They should redo the weekend thing. But anyway, so yeah, so the actual intentional motive of whomever, which would, since it's in a semi-square to the moon, yeah, that's the only aspect to that. That would insinuate that it's obviously associated with the full moon, which is the Taurus people, and that's the same sign that Pallas is in. That's the rebels or whatever. And the 9th house has Venus and Jupiter and the Sun in it, and Vesta. So the entire narrative for the New York City Antifa movement was something about how concerned about the general welfare of their fellow man, which explains the humanity thing. But they had Vulcan and Mercury, and obviously the MC2 in the 10th house, Vulcan and Mercury. So it was likely very brash and forceful narratives, and they likely weren't nice and making it seem like they actually give a fuck about humanity during that entire thing, I'm sure. And then we have actually nothing in the 12th house. So there's essentially they must have said everything they wanted to say at the New York one. They were completely transparent. They were confused as fuck, or at least like in general, you didn't necessarily understand. Like one of the counter protests mentioned that Antifa is using the LGBTQA community. Oh yeah, I'm already yeah hello. That's the old jokes. Like if you, well, I'm not saying yeah hello you, but you know what I mean. If you look at even like the memes and stuff, or like the gender fluid people are part of the Antifa. Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I've already made references to that when they started talking about cutting off heads. I know that stupid ginger chick that had the Trump's head thing that she basically ruined her career for doing that. I know that wasn't that substantially influential. That's the method that they've just chosen to start cutting people's heads off. I'm fully convinced that a lot of the infiltration of the Muslims being in, like, for example, what is that? Is it MSNBC or is it CNN or something like that? That guy who's no, it's SNBC or something like that. That guy who's a Muslim who's and I have nothing against that per se, but when they start to tell me I should start wearing a hijab and stuff and like that, I'm just kind of like, how about you tell me the news, dude? Don't tell me what to do. Tell me the news. Don't tell me what to do. That's the one thing the news needs to fucking straight. And the day that that happens is the day that I'll start watching TV again. I actually even gave my TV away. I had a giant like full screen one. I watch YouTube on it, but I won't even do that anymore. I gave it away. It was like a huge flat screen smart TV. I don't fucking care. I hate televisions that much. But anyway, so we have Saturn, Lilith, and Hygeia and Pluto in the 11th house. So essentially, with Hygeia being there as well, that's emphasizing that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and whatever therapeutic wise with like collectively the country or social, it's obviously things are you Antifa? No, I'm an astrologer who's actually laying out the protest down, essentially. I predict fatal and catastrophic events, and threatening to cut a bunch of people's heads off and starting riots is essentially kind of that's why I talk about this. I'm actually not affiliated on either side of the spectrum, as a matter of fact. So I'm the best person, I guess, besides the news, if you want news is real, for an objective perspective. Yeah. So anyway, so the New York one, obviously they got their message out, but it was a confusing message because again, they seemed like they were probably really harsh, and but their whole narrative was supposed to be about um, loving their fellow man and humanity. and that's just sending mixed signals for sure. Then we will look at Portland. I believe Portland has weather advisories going on tonight. So we have the South Node in the first house, meaning that the Portland one went the same way as the Austin one did. So it was a flop, more or less. They didn't have as big of a turnout, or they were very disorganized. And there will be Ceres being in the seventh house yet again, would insinuate that the elementals are essentially going to cause some sort of huge blizzard or storm of some kind that's going to essentially slow down or cause some sort of fog or disorientation that will cripple any of their future endeavors and plans. And the third house, having Earth and Uranus there, essentially, and that's almost going over the ascendant. It just went over the ascendant, so this is right after it. So I actually would have had the Portland Antifa an hour or so earlier. There would be some sort of either medical or physiological death signature, death involved in Portland. So it's fun. It's fascinating the time shows for this. But so essentially the third house being the immediate environment or narrative, there was just obviously a presence of Antifa people running their mouths in Portland today. But I mean, isn't that kind of every day? At least I know. Fountain. I went to like a rave like a couple blocks away from that like 7 or 8 years ago. Really, really like confusing, congested place with people. So then we have Palace, the Earth symbol, and then the moon in the fourth house. So that would be insinuating that they're passionate their problems with the country, and that was essentially what was going on. Mars is in the ninth house for that one, so they were more just talking about what they would like to do or what they intend to do. They didn't actually do anything. Is what obviously the news was kind of trying to perpetuate. And then we have a stellium with Jupiter, the Sun, Vulcan, Mercury in the 10th house, meaning that their narrative or their persona that they were giving off was very plutonic and dark and gloomy, and it would be me describing anybody. You know how that goes, Fred, I'm sure. So, see, I'm the perfect person to talk about this. But then we have Saturn and Lilith in the house. Wow, Lilith is at 29 degrees too. Fascinating. Okay, so yeah, that would essentially just be that they must have they were likely actually saying things specifically about the establishment, or they gave themselves away with the that they were narrating things about what plan to do, or it would be like when I see that kind of signature, I would think that somebody goes, George Soros is my boss. That would, I know that they didn't actually say that, but that would be the equivalent of that just in layman's terms. And then Julia and Pluto are in the 12th house, meaning that there's they're conspiring essentially to try to slowly something. Yep, that would be their whole narrative with that. So, like I said, it was just basically talking again. I mean, even Boo, my Boo has, and if there's ever fantasizes all day long because he has like an Aries Black Moon Lilith about getting into a physical brawl with somebody, he's the person I send in if I'm like I'm like feeling homicidal. I'm feeling homicidal. I cannot do this right now. I cannot look at their face and there's going to be blood. I send him in to de-escalate the situation. Some days I'll even wake up and I'll just, that's it. And no, I haven't actually killed anybody. That's why I send Boo. But yeah, he's got a Libra Mars, so Mars is in Libra right now. Significant, every single one of these charts, the top half of the wheel is supposed to do with, not with the self, but everybody else. And so we're looking at Tucson. This was at a Comic-Con. We were joking last night about how aren't a lot of people that go Comic-Con kind of the leftist, nerdy type people or something like that? And so I was thinking, like, just pissed that they wanted to go to the Comic-Con, so they had their rally at Comic-Con so they could go. That was my joke. Because, again, it seems like they didn't really have anything going on here. So the south node was house. So it means that like um their secrets or whatever, or their past tactics in general, or their past kind of conspiring um plans were essentially their undoing with that. They had Neptune and Chiron in the first house, meaning that they were completely disorganized and didn't have any idea what they were doing. And then they had Eris and Uranus in the second house. So essentially, the future with that would be that they probably didn't even know that there were Antifa people at Comic Con, is what I'm gathering from this. That's pretty much what it says. So I would actually assume that since especially Ceres is not on a now house, the people will be likely targeted tonight in Arizona and Arizona for sure. I would assume that they're going to go and randomly attacking or whatever. It wouldn't be we don't have Uranus or any kind of trauma signature fourth house. Although Taurus is, which is obviously where the full moon is, so it could actually be some sort of chaos or rebellion, specifically being inspired to go in neighborhoods or suburban areas. And Mars and Venus are in the eighth house, and so obviously the motives are at the Comic Con today are elusive. It kind of just reinforces that probably nobody even knew they were there. And they had Jupiter and the Sun and Vulcan in the ninth house of mind. So they were likely thinking about what they were going to say, thinking about essentially the greater good. But I just kind of think that they protest here before in my town. Like I was the one that yeah against Bank of America, just because I'm against Bank of America. And I got like 200 something people like to like this Facebook page, and I kept saying, let's go ahead and like go out there. And I even made extra signs so when people show up, if they wanted to show up and not prepare, they could just take one of mine. I was the only one that did that for 3 solid fucking weeks. Nobody else showed. So and I know to the Occupy movement are Antifa people too. So I know that for a fact because I changed that page to the counter coalition page, and yeah, I got a lot of hate mail and threats for that. What you gonna do? Anyway, so then there's Lilith and Juno and Hygeia and Pluto in the 11th house, and so that just kind of reinforces what was going on for New York, I believe, is that sunlight is the best disinfectant, and anything that may have uh, basically transpired will be the lesson collectively that everybody will need to learn. So the dead even told me themselves that this is something that has to happen. This event has to happen in order for there to be like the plot twist, more or less, with the country's future. So a plot twist in like a movie would be, you're deciding you want to go along to this, and then all of a sudden you find out that you're going to hell, so you got to go the other way, this sort of thing. So that's essentially the plot twist is the intervention, more or less, or the confrontation with Antifa people. Which, again, for people that are just jumping in, from the initial of the day, it'll be something that will slowly start to transpire, but deaths and beheadings of people and attack Trump supporters, just as it kind of escalated over time, and I say Trump supporters because that's who they're supposedly targeting, right? That it's going to be a slow progression thing they'll build. So it's going to be like really, really minimal like confrontations and attacks, and it's going to slowly escalate. And they're going to continue to do this like try not to report it stuff. Again, as per usual. And let's see, what other ones do I have in here? Seattle's and Seattle one oh sorry, wrong computer. Seattle's Boo was telling me that actually. That they actually canceled, or all the people that were going decided not to go because it was raining. I was like, thank you, elementals. That's so great. So there was Lilith, Juno and Pluto and Hygeia in the first house. And then the future house was the South Node in Aquarius. And essentially, we had that Chiron signature, which is the weakness or Achilles heel, and Neptune in the third house, which would be communications immediate area. So the actual rally and event itself was completely squashed, and Neptune being associated with rain and the sea, and it being in Pisces. Usually, when Neptune's in Pisces and the moon is in Pisces and it's conjunct, we usually have rainstorms. If you ever wanted to test that and reference that, that's totally evident. So it's pretty funny that that's actually there. And then it's trining to Jupiter, which is in Scorpio, another water sign, and the Sun, and Vulcan and Mercury in the 11th house. So the 11th house is things out of people's control. So it would essentially translate to weather for that one, definitely so. And um, because the Seattle one was washed, it looks like there's Uranus and Eris in the fourth house of home. So there will be attacks in Seattle tonight. Absolutely so. And that actually explains why there's a huge weather wintry advisory for massive amounts of snow all over the state of Washington. Thank you, elementals, for doing that yet again. And then we have Pallas and the moon and the earth symbol in the fifth house of self, meaning that the deviants or the people that are trying to force their way, the Antifa people, are essentially going to lash out in some way through their expression, meaning they're likely going to go and cause a bunch of ruckus outside people's homes. And when people come out to see what the fuck is going on, they're likely going to attack them. Yeah. Aries is in the eighth house of secrets at this point as well, meaning that that would be the past. So yeah, associated with the past. So essentially they were able to stop them with weather in the past per se. It doesn't necessarily wait a minute. No, that's the future, sorry. The eighth house is the future house. My bad. So yeah. So the future is going to be like tonight. There's going to be a huge blizzard winter advisory going across the entire state of Washington. Even it's starting at 11 p.m. because I'm in Washington State. That's going to be when the advisory starts as blizzard conditions from the coast all the way to into Idaho. So, then we have Mars in the 10th house, which again is more means that they were just taking out their ass about their motives, and them having the Scorpio stellium, so Jupiter and the Sun, Vulcan and Mercury, all in the 11th house, would mean that whatever they were saying today, or whatever they actually intend to do tonight, will be traumatizing, potentially destructive. And I would assume that. Where's the death signature? Yeah, because Pluto's actually in the first house. Yeah, there will be deaths in Seattle tonight due to this. I instantly want to say that people are going to be experiencing home invasions. And unfortunately, because of how anti-gun Seattle is, it probably won't turn out like that old lady or that old couple in South Carolina that shot the Antifa people that were attacking them. But honestly, in all honesty, no matter what side of the spectrum you're on, if a 70-year-old crippled little old lady is just, going about her business and somehow, some way, Antifa people just try to, confront her, three of them, and they're obviously young kids, usually boys. It doesn't matter, scrawny as sticks, and I could break them over my leg if I wanted to. They were picking on a little old lady. And there's a reason why that little old lady carries a gun, because of things like that, and they shot them. That won't be the fortunate outcome with that, because most people in Seattle, especially, I know for a fact, don't like guns. It's also on the other side of the state where we wish we were red. Because I love firearms, and I don't go anywhere without mine. Then for San Francisco, it's the same chart pretty much as Portland. Yep. And let's see. It looks like that there will still be attacks in San Francisco tonight. I still don't think California looks good, safety-wise, or or Portland. And those were actually some of the specific locations that I referenced on a blog that I posted on my Minds thing on the 20th of October, so over 2 weeks ago. I said those are the places that make me very uneasy: New York City, Portland, Chicago, Seattle, and all of California. Yeah. And what else do I have? I think that's the gist of that. I mean, did anybody have, I guess, any questions about it? Probably not. I don't even. There's like supposedly 2 or 3 people watching. I don't even know who those people are. Fred, did I have any like interference or anything, or no? That would be so cool if I didn't. I don't know if you're. Somebody's here. Well, anyway, I'm gonna get going because there seems to be no questions. And yeah, so hope you all enjoyed, I guess. And yeah, again, the West Coast. You were breaking up mentioning Boo. Oh, okay. Well, I double recorded on my other laptop, so I'm gonna upload that one anyway. I just wanted to make sure that like if I stumbled onto anything really really concerning, that I got it right away and didn't deal with this. But yeah, so I guess people who don't want to die or live in the West Coast areas or Chicago or New York want to share this for your own sake and for your family's sake or whatever else. Expect potential random uninvited guests, maybe, especially if you're in a very questionable neighborhood, throughout this weekend. And wary every time you answer your door and lock your doors. That's all I have to say. And also be wary about fires, murder, and arson. And apparently cutting. And lots of blood and screaming will be the themes. Yep. All right.